Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Post lunch, we're going to talk about vector control. So when we CCDEH started planning for this conference, it was made clear that it's been some time since we had a vector control presentation. So we're going to fix that today. I was happy to hear, though, in most of the presentations over the last couple of days, that vector control funding and the need for it has been mentioned several times. So I guess you can say we can literally get into the weeds about it today. And but what I want to do first, though, is read a post from NACHO, the National Association of City and County Health Officials. A new report published by NACHO with support from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention finds that local vector control programs that responded to a 2023 national survey routinely conduct mosquito surveillance and control, but continue to face barriers with pesticide-resistant testing. Most responding programs do not engage in tick surveillance or tick control, but more than half of the responding programs do educate their communities about how tick-borne diseases are transmitted and how they can be avoided. The findings emphasize the need to provide more funding and technical assistance to local vector control programs and validate several of the goals outlined in CDC's National Public Health Strategy to prevent and control vector-borne diseases in people. Specifically, the goal to disseminate and support the implementation of effective public health and vector control products, tools, programs to prevent, detect, diagnose, and respond to vector disease threats. So with that in mind, I'm happy to hear about the focus, but as you guys know, with climate change and encampments and a lot of the issues along those lines, there is a proliferation of vectors in our communities and they need to be under control. So, I have the chief of our vector control program in Alameda County here today to give you an idea of what our program has been doing lately, but going back, according to our theme, to see how we started in Alameda County and where we are right now. Okay, so Dr. Adina White, is currently the Chief and Scientific Program Manager for Alameda County Vector Control. Dr. White received her PhD from UC Riverside in medical etymology with a concentration in chemical ecology. She also has a master's and bachelor's degree in etymology from UC Riverside with a focus in conservative biology. She has won an award based on her research and control of mosquito reproduction by introducing predators in the aquatic environment. Dr. White has presented at national and international conferences and also worked for San Joaquin County Mosquito and Vector Control District before coming to Alameda County. I present to you Dr. Adina White.
Afternoon, everyone, and thank you. And just for, you probably figured this out, but Mr. Browder is my boss, so I'd like to thank him for inviting me today and giving me this opportunity to talk to you about what I do for a living for the county. I promise there's no real gross photos in here. I do realize it is after lunch. What I explain to people that I do for a living is when people have the heebie-jeebies and they're screaming and there's some critter on their property and they don't know what to do, I'm the office you call. So for people who have no clue what vector control is or does, this is how I explain to them my life's work, basically. So thank you for coming. My talk today is going to be a little bit about the history of vector control in the state of California and how it came about, and then now what we are currently doing in Alameda County. So in the beginning, the history of mosquito control in the state of California actually began with mosquito control in and around the San Francisco Bay Area. And that is due, I'm sure as most of you kind of remember and realize, I mean, none of us were actually alive at that time. But, you know, the Bay was not what it is today. So it was mostly wetlands. surrounding the bay and the estuary system. And so what that meant was that in the spring and summer, you had hordes of mosquitoes coming off, which didn't used to be a problem until the city started to come up after the gold rush, and people started moving into the area in greater and greater numbers. So what kind of kicked off mosquito control in the state of California is when malaria hit the Central Valley, and that's a map of the state, obviously, with the Central Valley, so all the way from Sacramento down south to the Tulare Basin. And what happened is in 1908, there was an outbreak of malaria in the state. And so the public health departments at that time and the kind of infrastructure that there was got together and started trying to educate the public on mosquito control due to the presence of Anopheline mosquitoes. So for those of you who don't know, different mosquito species transmit different diseases. So we don't deal with malaria currently, knock on wood, in the state because we essentially eradicated the disease from the state. But we do have the mosquito species that are technically capable of vectoring them here. And this is actually a photo from back in the good olden days, and that was the mosquito control at the time, was you had your horse-drawn cart that you took around with some who knows what in the back, and you put it out trying to control the mosquitoes. So the first actual organized mosquito control for the state began in 1910. So as I mentioned, we do have mosquitoes that are native to California that do have the ability to transmit malaria, and those are Anopheline mosquitoes. So these are not the same mosquito species that transmit dengue or West Nile. We have various different mosquito species in the state, so sorry to those of you who thought we only had one. We have dozens. But we do have Anopheline mosquitoes that are able to do that. So as most of you know, or hopefully all of you know, malaria is still one of the most deadly diseases worldwide. It kills, hundreds of thousands of people every year, not in North America, but in Africa and Asia. And at this time in California, and bed nets didn't exist. There weren't even window screens on buildings. So the presence of mosquitoes was a really big thing because it was killing hundreds of people. So the legislature got together and passed the California Mosquito Abatement Districts Act, AB 1590, and this was enacted in 1915. And one of the first districts that actually came about was in the Bay Area, and that's San Mateo County Vector Control. So they started with trying to eradicate mosquitoes in 1904, and then officially began a program in 1915. And that's a picture from their website of their staff and their buildings, I'm guessing based on the cars in the 50s. But Marin and Sonoma Vector Control was actually the first vector control district in the state. So they began doing mosquito control in 1903 and officially became a district in 1915. And that is actually a picture from Marin, Sonoma of the earliest days of mosquito control, where these guys were just walking through fields, carrying cans of pesticides and whatever with horse-drawn carts. So this act, however, even though it was great and it was a move forward for public health, it only covered the control and eradication of mosquitoes. So this changed a little bit after 1915 because there was nothing to address other vectors. And so this didn't change until 1935 when the more legislation was passed. And then what happened was we had the next district that came about, which was the Carpinteria Pest Abatement District in 1936. Which is now morphed into the Mosquito and Vector Management District in Santa Barbara County. And then the next district to come about was in East Side in the Valley, and so they have been established since 1939. So that was great. We now moved into mosquito control, and that was happening in an organized manner around the state. But what about all the other vectors? So what I mean by that is there are a host of other animals and insects and arthropods that can transmit disease. So before we get too into the weeds of anything, I wanted to go over what actually a definition of a vector is. And a vector is a living organism that transmits an infectious agent from an infected animal to a human or another animal. And vectors can transmit infectious diseases either actively or passively. So we were talking about fleas, we're talking about rats, opossums, a whole host of other animals besides just mosquitoes. So in Alameda County, we're a little bit different, where we actually have two different districts. So because of the formation of that first act to control mosquitoes in the 30s, we have the Alameda County Mosquito Abatement District was formed, but they deal strictly with mosquitoes. So they are only enacted from that original act, and they are only chartered to deal with mosquitoes. And that's actually a picture from their website of I'm guessing the 40s. I'm not quite sure if there's any motorcycle fans out there, you can correct me, of what era that motorcycle's from, but that's a gentleman, conducting mosquito control back in the day. And for what I do and where I am, Alameda County Vector Control, we came about in 1984, and we deal with everything else. And what I mean by everything else is I mean everything else. So we deal with fleas, ticks, lice, rodents. We have several rodent species in the county, and then we also deal with wildlife, and everything that isn't a mosquito falls under my purview for my district. So the history of our district, as I mentioned, we began in 1984, and that's actually a picture of what was sent to the Board of Supervisors at the time for why we needed to become a county service area. And this had to do with rodent issues that we had in the county. A lot of it in the city of Oakland, but we have rodents and rodent issues countywide, and we historically have. So this got sent to the Board of Supervisors as an impetus of why we should be formed as a district. And that's just a picture of our county. We're quite a large county. We're about 781 square miles, I believe. And to the north of us is Contra Costa, to the east of us is San Joaquin County, and to the south of us is Santa Clara County. So we were established in 1984, and that's what our old logo looks like, and that's a historical map of Oakland. And the board did come around, obviously, and then did grant us to become a county service area that is funded by a benefit assessment, and that's the actual board proclamation that brought us into existence in 1984. But predominantly, we did a lot of work in the city of Oakland due to the rodent issue. And so in the beginning of our district, things were a little different. This is actually a picture of some of the original staff at the district, and things have evolved. If any of you recognize what Talon is, we have evolved from the days where you could mix rodenticide on the hood of your car with no gloves. I have not shown my safety officer this picture because I think she might have a heart attack. So she has not seen this part of the presentation. But back in the day, that was legal. So as I mentioned, we started out as the Oakland Rat Project, and this is a picture of some of the original staff. And that's a picture of our first chief, Harry Scott, looking dapper there in his check jacket down at the bottom of the classes. And so some of the staff have seen this photo, and what I tell them is they can totally dress like the Mod Squad. I don't care what, if they want to do vector control today, I don't mind. They just have to wear our shirt with our logo, and then they can rock the jacket and the hair and whatever else they want. But we literally started out as a very small group with a very specific focus, and that was to deal with rats, and pretty much rats. And so we have historically, so that's a picture of a Norway rat, the largest one there, the big brown rat, which is also known as the sewer rat. And we also have roof rats that run quite extensively in the city of Oakland and in the county. So as we started, what happened is the staff would go out with dealing with complaint calls that would come in from the public to people's homes and their businesses to try to help them address their rodent issues. And so this was not only residential, and then started moving into as business owners would call to help them deal with their rats. And so as time went on, we needed more staff because we were getting more calls. And the city of Oakland also realized that they had a severe issue with rodents emanating from the sewer system. So this is not just from the main, but also from sewer laterals in the city. And so what happened is that in 1987, the city passed an additional tax, and the voters approved an additional assessment of $1.28 for additional rodent control. And that tax is still on the books to this day. And we have a dedicated program that is run by the funds that come in from this additional tax. So what that program looks like is we call it our sewer baiting program. And this program is pretty unique. There's a few other places around the US and a couple of other places that have a sewer baiting program, but to my knowledge, this is the most extensive one that exists anywhere. And again, this began with the additional assessment that was passed in 1987 for the control specifically of rodents in the city of Oakland. And so for those of you who don't quite remember where Oakland is, we're across the bay from San Francisco, we've got Berkeley to our north, but what this entails is that my staff actually go and pop manholes, and we are contracted to look at 8,000 manholes a year for rodent control. So my staff literally go and pop 8,000 manholes looking for Norway rat activity in the city. So this brings us to the 90s for our district, and as things went on, our services began to expand. So what we call them are requests for service that come in from the public. So as I mentioned, that's homeowners, tenants, anyone who resides within the county can call in. This involves us going out and doing inspections of the actual property. And so this evolved for the staff to start doing actual identification of arthropods such as cockroaches. We started doing yellow jacket control, looking at other arthropods in the county like ticks, and then also dealing with a lot of solid waste issues. And that's a picture of our staff from back in the day. And as you guys know, dumping is still a major issue everywhere, unfortunately, but this also leads to additional vector problems if not dealt with. So these are some of the things that the staff was dealing with in the 90s. We also expanded our program and to start helping residents because we realized this was an issue with wildlife in the county. So we started partnering with the USDA APHIS with being able to remove quote-unquote nuisance wildlife from people's homes. And that's actually a picture of the old staff. My current staff are happy that they do not have to wear a dress to go to the field or a skirt. For my female staff, they are quite mortified by the fact that the staff used to go out in dresses to do inspections. And so this also evolved though with the staff moving into doing disease surveillance for the county because as our programs expanded. So we started doing things like rabies and Lyme disease and psittacosis cases and disease surveillance. And so that's a photo of one of the staff who, I'm sad to say, retired recently, but Mr. Gould looking very dapper and his aviators as he was out conducting disease surveillance for the county. We also started developing an outreach program for the county, obviously doing educational programs and letting the residents of the county know that we existed. And I'd like to highlight, this is Miss Anita Minter. So she recently retired and she came on board when our district was founded in 1984. So she retired after 43 years of service. And I don't think anyone else in our district is gonna be able to come close to that in terms of their years of service. So that's Anita talking to a homeowner at an educational event that was going on at that time. So we have also grown in service area over the years. So as I mentioned, the Board of Supervisors did make us a countywide service area, but at the time when we were founded in 1984, not all of the cities within the county decided to be part of our benefit assessment area. So that changed in 1992 where the city of Dublin, that's highlighted there in red, voted to join our service area. And then in 2009, the last two cities, which is Emeryville and then the city of Fremont, highlighted there, were both annexed into the county service area and then are now assessed the benefit assessment. So we do now indeed service the entirety of the county. So as I mentioned, we're quite a large county. We're 781 square miles, and not yet, but it's coming. We have not quite 2 million people in the county. So we have a lot of people, we have a lot of calls. So this brings us to the 2000s, and again, the staff were expanding because our services were expanding. And so, we're becoming more diverse, and I'm happy to say that a handful of folks that you see here are still on my staff today. And I'm very grateful because they have a lot of historical knowledge for our district. So some of them, I blatantly told them that they are not allowed to retire on me because I don't want to deal with it, and they can't take their knowledge with them. So they seem quite happy at the moment, and they're still on my staff. And some of you may know Ms. Lucia Hui, who our former chief, and she gave service to the state and to the county for over 30 years. She used to also work for CCDEH. And so this brings us to the 2000s, and what was basically expanding for our district at the time was our disease surveillance. So we began to conduct hantavirus surveillance. We developed a rabies program, which we still do today. So it operates under the guise of the Department of Public Health and is overseen by our public health officer. But vector control basically runs this program. So if there is an animal that needs to be removed from a property, if a bat gets into someone's home, it is my staff that go out and remove that bat. That bat is then tested. And so we deal with all the paperwork, we deal with the first contact often with the folks who are, they've come into contact with whether or not they'll need rabies prophylaxis, and so we coordinate that along with our public health department. We also work in conjunction with CCDEH on their muscle quarantine program, so we help put up signage around our part of the bay in areas that may be affected. And we also have a sort of unique program for schistosomiasis or swimmer's itch. And this came about kind of basically by accident. And so swimmer's itch, for those of you who are not super familiar with it, is also called cercarial dermatitis. And it is, sorry for the language, but it's the penetration of the larvae into your skin, basically, and it's a snail parasite. And so what happened is, and this is a problem in third world countries for the most part. So this is areas that do not have clean water, do not have portable, sanitation. So most people in the US are like, what do you mean snails do stuff besides, being gross or whatever, right? What do you mean that they can transmit disease? So we started getting complaints from Crown Beach in Alameda, which is about 15 minutes from our office, of swimmers coming out of the water and then getting a rash there, and we didn't know what was going on. So the staff at Vector Control at the time, this happened in 2004, started working with CDC and started trying to figure out what was going on. And so this research went on for over 3 years, and what we found out was there was a new invasive marine snail that had come into the area. So it is actually affectionately called a Japanese bubble snail. But for any of you who went to the aquarium yesterday, it is a nudibranch, so it's a marine sea snail. And so this snail came in also with an invasive parasite that causes swimmer's itch. So this is something that, the park area that runs the beach is aware of, and this is something that we still get calls about today. So this brings us to what we have going on in Alameda County today, and we have quite a lot of things. So this is our current mission statement for our district, and it says that the mission of the Vector Control Services District is to prevent the spread of vector-borne diseases, injury, and discomfort to the residents of the district by controlling insects, rodents, and other vectors, and eliminating causal environmental conditions through education and integrated pest management practices. So as I mentioned, we deal with everything else in the county. And so as I showed you the slide before, we deal with everything: fleas, ticks, lice, mites, cockroaches, bedbugs, flies. We have several rodent species in the county: Norway rats, roof rats, we have deer mice, we have voles. We have a lot of different animals in the county, because even though we have almost 2 million people living in the county, we still have historical rangeland and ag land in the county. So we have quite a lot of critters running. We also deal with all the wildlife in the county. So skunks, possums, and raccoons are the main ones we deal with, but we also deal with foxes, coyotes, ground squirrels, tree squirrels, turkeys, you name it. If it's got legs, if it's an animal, if it's a reptile, people call. So we deal with a lot of things at my district. So the next kind of big evolution for us in terms of where we are today is when my new disease surveillance lab opened in 2019. So we went through a remodel for part of our building, and so this has allowed us to expand our disease surveillance programs and also our ability to collaborate with a lot of different departments and different organizations. So that's a picture of my main laboratory, and it has several microscope stations. And so my staff can come back in from the field with samples that they need to look at, and they can go take a look under the microscope. We also do molecular work in-house. We also do ELISA and other testing in-house. And so this has allowed us to greatly expand our disease surveillance program and what we're capable of. But our bread and butter is still to do requests for service, as I mentioned. So this is what we call our service calls that come in. So we deal with anywhere between 4,700 to 6,000 calls from the public a year. So I have about 30 staff when I'm fully staffed, so that works out to several hundred calls per staff per year. And the majority of those calls are actually investigated, because no offense to the general public, but they don't often know what they're dealing with, or they misidentify things. We have people call in stating that they've got animals that don't even exist on this continent running around in their attic, So it's no offense to the general public, but we can't take their word for it a lot of the time because they misidentify stuff. So my staff actually go out, so they make contact with the person, and again, this is a homeowner, this is whatever resident in the county, a business owner, tenant, landlord, it doesn't matter. My staff will go out and then actually investigate those calls so that we do actually know if it is a vector and what vector it is that we are dealing with. So what does this mean in reality? This means we go out. This means we go out and we deal with bed bugs. So that's actually, I used to do inspections when I first started at the district. So that's actually a picture I took of somebody who had bed bugs and wasn't sure, needed confirmation. We deal with rodents getting into homes because homeowners don't understand where they're coming from. rat issues. So sorry, this may be the grossest picture after lunch, but this is, someone's home where they've got a ton of rodent droppings in their attic. They're thundering up there. It's like a herd of elephants, and it's rats, but because it's hollow, it echoes. The rats have been running for quite a long time. We deal with a lot of tenant-landlord issues, unfortunately, so the presence of German cockroaches in homes, in apartments and things that need to be treated. So this is kind of the bread and butter of what my staff do a lot of the time. But we do a lot of other things. So our authority is granted under the umbrella of the Department of Public Health. But we also work with what we call our Mosquito and Vector Control Association of California, or MEVCAC. So California, along with Florida, we have the most extensive vector control system and organization of anywhere in the US. So unfortunately, there are some states where vector control doesn't even really exist, or it only exists in pockets. There's nothing that covers statewide in terms of an actual organized vector control program. Within the state of California, we do have coverage pretty much from end to end to the state, and we do have an organization. So what that means is that we get together on a regular basis, we have conferences, we have quarterly meetings, we meet with each other, we talk to each other, because as I explain to people on a regular basis, the mosquitoes and the rats don't have boundaries. They don't look at maps, right? They don't understand that we've constructed that this is my county and that's your county, and I can't fly that quarter of a mile because that's the next county. They don't get that memo. So when things happen, we need to be able to coordinate with each other, and that is what we do, thankfully, in this state. So we also partner with a lot of other agencies. So that is city code enforcement, county code enforcement, because we still have quite a lot of unincorporated land in the county, actually. Building and Housing Authority within the various cities and the county. Adult Protective Services, unfortunately, we have a lot of low-income areas in the county, Oakland being one of our main ones. So unfortunately, sometimes when my staff go out, there is an issue, and so we will have to report it to APS. We have a lot of mental health issues these days, as you all know. So one of the things that unfortunately we are dealing more and more with is something that's called delusory parasitosis. So those are people who feel, unfortunately, that they are infested with some sort of insect or arthropod, which isn't true, but we've even had new ones, which I don't even know if there's a different name for this, but we've had people claim that their living situation is being infested with rodents when they don't have any. So delusory rodent, there's no name for this. We just call it delusory parasitosis at this point. But so with that, we do try to refer these people sometimes for mental health services, and we deal with all of the cities within the county as well, and all of their regulations and jurisdiction. Also, because of what we do, we coordinate with all of the animal control districts in the county. And in the various cities. We also partner with California Department of Fish and Wildlife. As I mentioned, USDA Wildlife Service, so I'm very lucky, and we are the only vector control district in the state that has this partnership, where I have someone on staff with me who is federally permitted. So he actually works for USDA APHIS Wildlife Services, but he's also one of my staff. So he comes to my office every day. So he jokes sometimes because he's got two bosses he has to report to. So depending on what happens, he will be called off to deal with projects for USDA, but if not, then most of the time he's helping me deal with wildlife calls in the county. What that does allow, though, is that we can deal with animals that are permitted that normally most vector controls would never legally be allowed to deal with. So we can do coyote work, we can do mountain lions. We have not had a bear in the county in decades, but so anything like that. Game animals, which are turkeys, actually. People don't realize that, and we have people feeding turkeys in the county, so now we've got turkeys running around where they've never run around before, and they're chasing people, all those sorts of weird things. Like I said, when people freak out, it's my office that they call. So thankfully, we've had this relationship on the books for over 30 years now, and so I can ask him to go out and help and deal with that. We also help partner with CDFA, the Ag Department. And then for those of you who may know, we have the East Bay Regional Park System. So between us and Contra Costa County, I believe it is either the largest or one of the largest kind of urban park systems in the state and also in the country. So we do have quite a lot of open land. So we do quite a lot of disease surveillance out on the trails and things to make sure that the public stays safe. I do want to point out, though, that vector control does not have legal authority over building codes and regulations or permitting. So what that means is that we cannot legally write citations, we cannot put liens on buildings, and people get very confused with that because I have public health clearance or jurisdiction to declare a public health emergency, but I cannot go after a homeowner or a landlord or a slumlord because of building code violations. So because of that, we have to work very closely with code enforcement, be it at the city or county level, in order to deal with those issues. So as I mentioned, we do operate under the guise of CDPH and our public health officers, so we are public health officers in a sense, but we don't have enforcement ability. So that's a picture I took when I was doing an inspection that I got called out for cockroaches, and this poor woman was like, oh, by the way, I also don't have a ceiling. Is there anything you can do about it? And the upstairs unit had a leak, and the ceiling had caved in, and the slumlord was like, well, whatever, that's your problem. So I got back and I called code enforcement. So these are the sort of partnerships and things that we deal with at Vector Control. So we operate under the California Health and Safety Code, and those particular sections is kind of what we generally operate under. So for hoarding situations, all sorts of things, we have to partner with code. I just want to make you aware there are some code enforcement issues that have come up recently that is not exactly great. So as you all know, and everyone knows, right, money is not going as far as it used to in terms of being able to get staff on board, keeping staff, being fully staffed. I'm also not fully staffed at the moment. And so what this has meant is that some of our cities within the county have unfortunately taken it upon themselves to write us into their municipal codes to try to get us to do the work that their code enforcement officers need to do. So county council has unfortunately had to send basically cease and desist letters to these cities, letting them know that they cannot just arbitrarily write Vector into the code. So my staff have gone out to do inspections and then said, okay, well, we need to contact so-and-so code enforcement, and code has literally called them back and told the tenant, oh, well, Vector Control will deal with it, we're out. And we legally can't do that. So it's been quite an issue over the last couple of years, and the latest thing that came up, which thankfully I have talked to the city and they will now be rescinding their codes, but they also wrote Vector Control into their building codes. And they had written in that new construction in the city could not go forward unless Vector Control cleared the site. I can't do that. I have public health exemption. I cannot clear your site of disease on a permanent basis. I also cannot state that there are no rodents and no insects and no anything ever living on your site, which is what I had to explain to them, that legally that's what they were asking me to do. And I told them I refused. And that's not something that they were going to get from us. So I said, we are sort of at an impasse unless you would like to change your codes, because I am not going to grant you clearance for your construction projects. And so thankfully they were reasonable, and last I heard they are in the process of looking at their municipal codes and removing us so that their construction projects can go forward, because I told them that they can either sit on these construction projects because they are not going to be getting a letter from me stating this. So I just wanted to make you all aware that this is something that is happening, and we had no idea. All of a sudden we got a call into our office from the developer saying, I need your people to go out because I need my site cleared so construction can commence. And I went, excuse me, what are you asking? We were never told by these cities. So this is just something for you all to be aware of. As I mentioned, we do over 6,000 calls a year some years, and most of what we deal with, over half of the calls that come into my district have to deal with the rodents we have in the county. So this involves wild and commensal rodents. So by commensal, we mean that they're associated for living nearby or in human structures and habitations. So my sewer abating program is still going on today, as I mentioned, because that tax is still on the books. So we still have our dedicated program, and that is a picture of my staff, Ruben, who does an amazing job, and he is in charge of our program, and this happens year-round for us. And this is specifically for Norway rat control, because that is the rat species that we have, and that's the rat species that is in most municipal sewer systems. So the way that our program works is we break the city up into census tracts, and then Ruben systematically goes from census tract to census tract, checking every single one of those manholes. And as you all know, for what you all do for a living, there are a lot of manholes that exist. So about 10-15 years ago, our previous chief decided to get together, and they developed a program so that we could actually track the manholes in the city. So this is a real-time program that Ruben uses, and as he's out actually doing the work with my other staff, he can go then mark which ones have been checked, which ones need to be checked, which ones we put rodenticide into. And so this is a program that we use, and then also we're able to collect data from that. We are trying to move into a new era for our program, and that involves something called pulse baiting. So what that is that basically what we do when we check the various manholes is that we put down rodenticide, but all that does is kill off the rats that are in the immediate vicinity. It doesn't actually drop the rodent level to a level where it's eliminated in that area. Pulse baiting is meant to do that. So that means that we go back repeatedly to the same areas and then drop additional rodenticide down until we can drop that rodent activity to almost zero. And that gives us a longer lag time until we have to go back and treat that area again. What we have done to date in the couple of census tracts that we are doing our initial experiments in, it seems to be working, but we have not moved yet into doing this countywide or citywide because this is quite labor intensive. And I just don't have the manpower at the moment to move to that, but we are hoping to do that for additional rodent control in the city. We also conduct smoke tests and dye tests for the public. So a lot of the infrastructure is old and aging and falling apart in these cities, and people don't realize that their rat activity can be due to infrastructure failure. So we help conduct a lateral smoke test on people's homes, and we also have the ability to manhole smoke test the street, meaning that we can literally pump enough smoke into the city system for street-wide, basically, surveillance. So we have that ability, and that's pictures of my staff. That's for conducting a lateral smoke test, and then we have manhole smokers. And we have found some of the mains that have actually gone down in the city of Oakland. And because everyone in the neighborhood seemed to be having rodent issues, and we couldn't figure out what was going on. So we smoked the street and found out that the main had gone down. So as I mentioned, we are legally allowed to put out rodenticides to protect the public health, and we do this in a variety of ways. And however, this is going to change, or this has changed for all of you because of the bill that was passed. So AB 1322 basically bans the use of second-generation rodenticides from being used. Commercial pest control is no longer legally allowed to use it, period. So what that means is there's only a few organizations left, I'm one of them, who legally can put out rodenticide for any sort of public health measure. And what that means in reality is homeless encampments and other areas like that. So those are pictures that I took from our one of our homeless encampments, and no commercial pest control company is going to go anywhere near this. They're just not. So that basically leaves us, because we are public health officers, to deal with it. So thankfully, we do have exemptions in this bill that allows for vector control specifically to maintain its ability to put out rodenticides, but commercial pest control, Terminex, Clark are no longer legally allowed to put rodenticide out on second generation. So just to clarify for you all, AB 1322 was passed in 2023 and bans the use of second generation rodenticide. Another bill was just passed, literally I think 2 weeks ago, 2552, and it bans the use of first generation rodenticides like warfarin. So now what this means is commercial pest control can't use any of these products to control rodents. There are exemptions, and these are the exemptions. So warehouses used to store foods for human or animal consumption, ag food production sites, including but not limited to slaughterhouses or canneries, factories, breweries, or wineries, ag production sites housing water storage and conveyance facilities, ag production sites housing rights-of-way and transportation infrastructure. But again, commercial pest control cannot legally put out restricted materials anymore except in these areas, meaning residential routine rodent control is now no longer allowed using these products. Again, vector control does still maintain legal authority to be able to do that, but what you all need to be aware of is most of your vector control districts around the state do not have a rodent program, and they do not deal with rodents, period. There's only about 4 of us in the state, and unfortunately, unfortunate for the residents of Alameda County, we are the most extensive program. Most of, if not all of the other vector control districts in the state do not do anything remotely close to what my district does. So this is just something for you all to be aware of, because again, in places like this, so this is one of the homeless encampments, no commercial pest control is going to go out and deal with that. And from this particular encampment, we have trapped hundreds of rats out over the last 5 years. This brings me to the disease surveillance that we do, because we did start a disease surveillance program for the homeless encampments because it's so bad. And what that means is that we deal with the largest homeless encampments in the city. So this map is hopelessly outdated, but we do deal with the largest encampments in the city because it does take time for the rats to come in and for populations to increase and start causing issues. So 2 of the encampments are some you might have heard of because they've actually made it onto the national news, and that's High Street Home Depot and Wood Street. So we do try to work with the various, like the city of Oakland, for us to be alerted when they're gonna go clean out a homeless encampment so that we can go in and try to do disease surveillance as well as control measures. This is to a varying degree of success, but that is basically what we're trying to do, is prevent the rats from scattering to the surrounding areas. And we started a disease surveillance program because there was an outbreak of flea-borne typhus in Los Angeles in 2019, and 124 people were infected. And we know that actually, technically, historically, we have had this disease also in our neighboring county to the north. So we wanted to get ahead of the things and not allow it and have a whole bunch of disease outbreak going on for the residents in the homeless encampments. Because we have the cycles of transmission and we have all of the vectors in the county. So we have the classic cycle is a rat-flea-rat cycle, which isn't a problem except when the fleas decide that they're going to no longer stay on the rats and then bite people. There's also a peri-domestic cycle for this disease, which involves opossums and feral cats. And actually Texas, California, and Hawaii are the places where we know that this cycle does exist. And once the flea is infected, it stays infected until it dies. So it's not as though it just bites once and then can infect that particular host. It can bite multiple people or multiple hosts. So the pathogen that we are talking about is Rickettsia typhi, or the causative agent of murine typhus. And this was the first species that was linked to flea-borne rickettsiosis worldwide. And as I mentioned, we have both of the rat species that are involved and the flea species that is involved in the county. There is a secondary pathogen that we test for, and that is Rickettsia felis, and its main vector is the cat flea, which is kind of a misnomer. So if anybody has had their dog needing to be treated by fleas, your house needing to be flea bombed, chances are you are dealing with cat fleas. They are ubiquitous on pretty much every animal, it's just that they're called cat fleas. And this is the confirmed biological vector of flea-borne typhus. So the reason that the Norway rats are so bad in the homeless encampments, there's several reasons, but there's actually an inordinate amount of food in these encampments. There's also issues that come up where, so this is one of the encampments in the city where a local nonprofit was trying to build tiny homes for the residents. They also went in and dumped pounds and pallets worth of wood chips so that the site wouldn't be muddy for the residents living there. Unfortunately, what that meant is we couldn't follow any of the rats because they covered over everything. And now all of the signs that we were using to trap the rats out were gone. There's also just an enormous amount of debris. So what that means is there's a constant food supply and there's a constant amount of harborage in these homeless encampments. So the rat populations go through the roof. And when I mean that food is everywhere sometimes in the encampments, they're everywhere. So that's a picture of one of my staff. We got out to do some disease surveillance and trapping one afternoon, and someone, meaning well, had left an entire Mexican buffet at the encampment whose office didn't eat it, but this is like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So if this food isn't eaten by about 7, this just becomes food for the rats in the encampment. And this is a picture of the High Street Home Depot encampment, which unfortunately isn't that far from our office, but this made it into the New York Times. So they sent a drone up over this encampment, and at its biggest iteration, we had about 120 people in this encampment, plus dogs, plus everything, and we have trapped hundreds of rats out of this encampment over the last 5 years. We also bring the rats back and we humanely euthanize them, and then we also test them for other pathogens. So we take their blood and then we do the serological testing on it, and then we test them for soul virus, which is a type of hantavirus, and then also leptospirosis. So far to date, all the tests have been negative, thankfully, so this isn't something that we've had to alert our public health department about, but we are trying to keep on top of the situation because it's not, unfortunately, getting any better. As I mentioned, because of our partnership with APHIS, USDA APHIS, Wildlife Services, we also deal with a lot of nuisance wildlife in the county. So that's if there's a skunk spraying under your house, if raccoons have ripped into your attic and they're having babies, we will remove the animals if we have to, if we can't get them to move on. And if we do, we use those animals in our disease surveillance. So as I mentioned, that gives me an opportunity to deal with a lot of other animals that most vector controls would not normally legally be allowed to deal with. That involves mountain lions, feral pigs, coyotes, deer. And so we've used that data and we've been able to map out where we've gotten positives for rickettsia in the county. So this is our data from 2021 and 2022. So this is a heat map. So the brightest red areas are our highest level of population density in the county. And we do find that we do have rickettsia countywide. Thankfully, to date, we have alerted the public health department of where we have had positive fleas. We don't know of any human transmission at this point, but this disease also presents kind of like every other flu. So you end up with fever, aches, chills, so a lot of people may have gotten something and maybe not know it. So we're still working on this, and this is one of our main disease surveillance programs in the district. So we have confirmed that along with Rickettsia felis, we have detected some other rickettsias in the county. Our possums, raccoons, and skunks have all come back as positive. From the fleas, we've also picked up fleas that were positive from Norway rats, feral cats, foxes, and feral pigs. So we have this disease running countywide, unfortunately, and so we are trying to do our best to keep an eye on it. One of our other programs is our hantavirus program. So this deals with deer mice, or Paramyscus maniculatus, and a couple other deer mice species. And these mice are generally sylvatic, meaning that they are not going to be found in like downtown LA or highly urbanized areas. They're in the kind of rural interfaces of the county. But we do have a lot of those areas where housing is continuously developing out into the rural ends of the county, and so we're having waves of rodents come through periodically. We also do a lot of surveillance in our regional park areas because hantavirus, although rare, can be deadly if not diagnosed. And you do only contract it from rodents. So that means either breathing in feces or urine that has been aerosolized, a bite of a rodent, their bedding, or wiping your mucous membranes with it. And so we do keep an eye on this, and thankfully all of our testing from 2023 from all of the surveillance that we did came back negative, but we do get positives in the county on a regular basis. So we also started doing plague surveillance for the first time in 40 years in the county. We do have historical cases of plague and human transmission in the county. Specifically, we're trying to target ground squirrels and our larger carnivores, like our coyotes and our feral pigs. And this is in collaboration with CCDEH. And thankfully, all the samples that we tested in our first year of surveillance have come back negative. We're also helping do avian influenza surveillance for the county. So this involves U.S. State Wildlife Services and also California Fish and Wildlife. Specifically, any waterfowl, shorebirds that come in, or raptors, we will test, and other birds for avian influenza. And we did help confirm the first cases of avian influenza in the county when it did hit, because we had a whole bunch of Canada geese that started to go down around the county and nobody knew what was going on, and it turned out to be avian influenza. So I'm sure most of you know, but it's throughout the U.S. and it's causing hundreds of millions of dollars of economic losses, because every time a commercial flock goes down, it has to be culled because it becomes positive. This is why you have egg shortages and you have shortages of fryer birds, basically. So that is another one of our programs. We also do West Nile surveillance. So we have a chicken flock on the eastern end of the county, which does double duty for avian influenza and West Nile virus detection. And so that is, again, another one of our programs where we are monitoring for that mosquito-borne disease as well. We also do a tremendous amount of tick surveillance in Alameda County. So we do have Lyme disease in the county, which is caused by Borrelia burgdorferi, because we have a lot of rodents running in the county. And so this disease, as I think most of you know, is transmitted to humans through the bite of a tick. And we have this vector in the county, or Ixodes pacificus, or the western black-legged tick. So most people, when they are bitten by a tick, will notice if the tick is an adult. The problem is this life stages that generally transmit the most pathogen are the larval and nymphal stages, which are the size of a poppy seed. So most people, if they've been bitten, do not even realize it. So we have quite a large, extensive Lyme disease and tick surveillance program. So this is a picture of where we've had positives in 2023. We do have ticks positive for Lyme disease in the county, as well as a sister pathogen called Borrelia miyamotoi. And again, this is you will not get ticks in like a highly urbanized area, so like downtown LA. You need to have grasses, you need to have open spaces. So this is again, kind of your rural lands, but we have a lot of hiking trails through the county. And so we help monitor those to keep the public safe because we have a lot of hikers in Alameda County. We also started testing for another tick-borne disease, Anaplasma phagocytophilum, because this disease is becoming more prevalent across the U.S. And what we did find is we do have ticks positive for this pathogen in the county as well. We also have other tick species, and I won't go through all of it, but what we did find is that we have quite a few pathogens running in this tick species in the county as well, and in several of our cities. So one of those pathogens, which is Rickettsia philippi, is a human pathogen, and we did pick it up from infected ticks at one of our most heavily used regional parks in our county. And so again, we alert the East Bay Regional Park District so that they can put out signage and that we can work with them for disease surveillance. There is a new tick disease that was just discovered in California last year. So yay for us if you do this for a living. It's kind of a weird thing to say yay about, but the person was infected in either Alameda or Contra Costa counties. And we believe by the rabbit tick, which is Hemophysalis, I can't say the last part correctly, Leptospirosis. And so it has now been named Rickettsia lanei, and it is a new human pathogen. So we had the first case of human pathogenicity from this person last year. They did not know what was going on. This person was hospitalized and actually started to go septic. And it turns out that it was a tick-borne disease. And so we do have this tick in the county, and so this is now, again, part of our disease surveillance program. I just want to wrap up by saying that we are still trying to expand our program. So because we do so much wildlife work, I'm trying to expand into some of the other diseases that do affect humans and wildlife in the county. And so one of those is raccoon roundworm. So for those of you who are not familiar with it, raccoons have the ability to spread this disease. What happens is there are eggs in their feces. So those are pictures of raccoon latrines, and that's actually what they're called. So raccoons are one of the few animals that poop in the same place all the time. So what that means is for any of you who have a raccoon on or near your property, the feces will build up and you'll just start getting a bigger pile. Unfortunately, if the raccoon is infected, there is a chance that it can get into a person. While rare, it does happen, and this one can cause a lot of problems because it's one of the few parasites that can actually cross the brain-blood barrier. And so it is a potential issue for children and for immunocompromised people. And so it's not anything that we've had the ability to monitor for yet in the county, but I am hoping that soon we will be able to start this program as well. So I know that was a lot, but with that, I would like to thank Mr. Browder for inviting me and letting me talk to you guys about what I do for a living. Hopefully I didn't gross too many of you out after lunch. But also thank my two former chiefs, who are my bosses, who helped grow the district into where we are today. So that's Mr. Robert Gay and Lucia Lee, my manager, my rectory ecologist, and Natalia, who does the most of my molecular work. So most of that data that I showed you today is work they helped do. So thank you for that, and I'll take any questions.
Hi, Dr. Y. Charles Gankle, Ventura County Environmental Health. Impressive program you have.
Thank you.
I'm exhausted just seeing what you're doing.
Sorry, we do more stuff, but there's only so much you guys can handle without your brains melting.
We primarily we have a passive rodent control program in our county, so we don't do any type of serious surveillance or treatment. Our focus is mostly on mosquitoes. Now, just to be clear, do you guys do adulticiding for mosquitoes as well, or do you just do larvicide treatment?
So that's kind of the confusing thing is we have, when all of the jurisdiction went down, we have the mosquito abatement district in our county. So that's Alameda County Mosquito. So that's their purview to deal with adulticiding and larviciding. We can't help with surveillance. We can't help if there needs to be a pesticide application done, but that's kind of their gig. So they deal with mosquitoes and I literally deal with everything else.
Great. And do you coordinate with them on dealing with invasive Aedes? And I'm not sure if you have them in your county.
So knock on wood, we have them in all the surrounding counties, which means we probably do have them and we just haven't discovered them yet. So yes, we will coordinate with them on that. We do get calls in, we do get alerted by the public health department about dengue cases, travel cases that come in, and then we are alerted. We work with them for doing like dead bird surveillance for West Nile, and we do collaborate on that. So you know, if they go out to a site and they've got rodent issues running or whatnot, they'll call us. If we go out to a site and we have mosquito breeding, we'll call them. So it's just kind of historically how we were set up, which is confusing because a lot of counties, you're a combined program like yours is. So for ours, it does allow us to do our resources kind of in two different directions. So they're funded by a separate tax than what I'm funded by. So they do their stuff and we do ours. And then, but we all do our best to keep everything at bay in Alameda County.
Thank you. Next word.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Can you come get it? I would like to get this. I'll edit this part out.
So, with regard to the baiting, is the only baiting that you guys do in the sewers, or do you guys do like burrow baiting or any activities like that?
Yeah, so we do. We do the rodenticide down the sewers, but we also do burrow bait. Generally, we will not do it around residents or in residential areas. So most of our burrow baiting is restricted to homeless encampments or other areas where commercial pest control, which is basically everywhere now, cannot go. So we will do that, but it's on a somewhat limited basis because the thing that you have to understand about the rats is that they don't die in the burrows and they don't die at that site. So if you put out rodenticide for those rats until they die will run. And so you have to alert the surrounding area and the neighbors that you do have to do it in a residential area, that anybody's dogs, anybody's cats cannot pick up any rodents because there will be potentially secondary poisoning. So that's another issue with the rodenticides that are being used now, is that the first generation were what were called multi-feed, so that you would have to feed on those multiple times, a rat would, before it would die. There were also better antidotes for them. The current second generation ones are a single feed, and it's a much shorter window for any antidote to be given to like a dog or another animal. And so that's kind of actually the thing, is that the second gens were developed to sort of be better, but in a lot of ways they're worse in that sense. And so yes, we still do put out rodenticide if need be in certain circumstances. And thankfully, because of those bills going through, we fought with our organization to keep our exemptions clear in that bill, because if we lose it, nobody can put out anything, you know. And so I can, if I feel that it's a public health threat, I can give authorization and we'll put it out, but it has to be for very specific things. So we do not, and we are not going to get into the business of doing residential rodent control, because that is a whole other ballgame.
And if I can do a follow-up question sort of on that last point, when you guys do your site visits at private homes, is there an expectation that then the county or vector control will do anything further, or do you guys just leave it at the assessments and then it would be up to the homeowners, like maybe just contract with their own?
Yes, so depending on the situation, basically my staff go out and then they provide a lot of education. So they teach the homeowner how to prevent the rodents from being on the property. We teach them how to do the rodent prevention. We'll show them what they need to do, and if they can't do it and they do need to contract with like a handyman or a commercial pest control will do rodent proofing for you, but it's not always at the best level, let's say. My staff teach them what they should be looking for and what they should be looking for in a contract, so that they don't get kind of taken advantage of, essentially, and that if need be, we will go out and then re-inspect to make sure that that rodent proofing was done correctly. So we will not do the work for the homeowner, but we will teach the homeowner, and a lot of times they can do it themselves, but we will work with the homeowner until the situation is resolved.
One more question.
Can you expand on that just a touch? If the homeowner or the property owner is reluctant to do litigation, what are the next steps for the district and for local county? I think there's motivation is sometimes hard to come by. And then a follow-up question is, with 1383 and curbside organic waste, backyard composting, what are districts thinking about that? Is there any preparation for that?
Yeah, so in terms of the composting, also the amount of rodent activity seemed to pick up during COVID because everybody was home, so everybody who wasn't a gardener decided they were gonna go grow tomatoes and have bird feeders. And so, you know, we started getting called, I have rats in my backyard, you need to do something. And so we'd go out and do inspections and we're like, oh, you know, when did you start putting the bird feeder up? 3 months ago. When did you start getting rats? 2 months ago. You know, so a lot of it is education. To answer your question with the homeowners, we can't force them. So that's the problem. So a lot of it is education. If it gets to a point of being really bad, we will invoke code enforcement and try to get code enforcement because most cities, if not all cities, do have code on their books stating, you know, that areas have to be kept clear of rodents, vermin, that sort of thing. We do run into issues because we could use a lot better or stronger code enforcement rules on the books that don't exist. It would be nice if they were there. So sometimes when we tell homeowners if there isn't any recourse is that they actually need to go and lobby their city council and you know, and we can go if need be as well and explain to them why this is important because the rats don't do boundaries. They don't do human identified boundaries, right? They'll run wherever. So a lot of it is education. And so we do try, you know, we do invoke the public health code and let people know, but it does become quite a big issue, especially with like slumlords and stuff that just assume that like this isn't their responsibility. But it is difficult and it does take multiple site visits sometimes from my staff. Thank you.